Good morning, everybody. My name is Leah LaRue. I'm the Director of Neighborhood Planning Units for the City of Atlanta's Department of City Planning. I want to welcome you all to our now quarterly Planning Initiatives webinar. And today is Saturday, February the 8th, 2025. I'm very happy to be joined by my colleagues this morning. First, our Commissioner Janae Prince is here with us. Commissioner Prince.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Greetings from the Department of City Planning Conference Room.
We also have Director Gregory Pace, who is the Director of the Office of Buildings. He's here to talk to you all about the short-term rental ordinance.
Good morning, everyone.
And Director Kieta Holmes, the Director of the Office of Zoning and Development, and she will talk to you all about party houses.
Good morning, everyone.
She's a little under the weather. Thank you for being here, Kieta. We also have the city arborist, my colleague, David Zaparanik. David?
Good morning, everybody. This is David Zaparanik.
All right. So I wanted to tell you all before we get started, the neighborhood planning units will have these items on your agendas during the months of February and March. If you are not familiar or active in your neighborhood planning unit or in your neighborhood association, you have to do that in order to participate in this conversation. These conversations will take place, the voting and the formal recommendations that communities make to the City of Atlanta will take place at the neighborhood planning unit meetings. If you live in Atlanta, you are a part of a neighborhood planning unit, even if you don't know that yet. Visit our website at npuatlanta.org to get more information, or feel free to give us a call, 404-546-0159. You can give us a call and we'll talk about which neighborhood planning unit you belong to, what neighborhood association you should be visiting and joining, and where you can get more information on all of these planning initiatives. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Soon as I can figure out how to advance the slide. There we go. All right, so we'll start with party houses. That's Z-25-05, Z-25-05. Kieta Holmes.
Good morning again, everyone. Please excuse my voice. The party house ordinance is a part of the City of Atlanta zoning ordinance, and the text amendment before you or before your MPUs requires that it be a recommendation be provided by all MPUs. Ordinance number Z-25-05 is an amendment to the regulations of the zoning ordinance related to party houses. This regulation was adopted via legislation 19-013-93, and it was created to combat the rise of party houses at that time. It is regular to make amendments to the zoning ordinance, and to do that, we're doing it with this legislation. I want to reacquaint everyone to what a party house is. It is defined as a single family, two-family, or multi-family dwelling unit and its premises that is used for a private gathering, which includes a ceremony, reception, large-scale gathering, or party that charges a fee for those to attend to use the party. That entry fee, donation, or operation cost for attendance is required to gain entry. The party house legislation ordinance has not changed. What you will see is a clarification of the definition and a chart created for those who enforce our party house ordinance early in the morning, which is usually our police officer, so it's easily identifiable as to where these regulations apply. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kieta. Next up, we will have short-term rental licenses 24-0-1687. Greg?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gregory Pace. I am the Director of the Office of Buildings within the Department of City Planning. Short-term rentals, this short-term rental ordinance amendment 24-0-1687 is a licensing ordinance for review and comment on the proposed fee increase. The proposed amendment, it clearly defines the short-term rental regulations, where short-term rentals can go, and rules for operating them. It also defines a multifamily complex, and the update outlines license requirements, including the fees and residency. It details the location and distance restrictions as well. For those that may not be aware, short-term rentals are simply put your Airbnb, your Vrbo, and those platforms that allow for residences to be used similarly as a hotel, but the rentals are less than 30 days as defined in our ordinance. This short-term rental licensing was something that was adopted back in 2022, 2023. And this here is an amendment to further and clarify and define what short-term rentals can be, how they can be licensed. Some of the proposed changes are that every short-term rental in the city of Atlanta must be registered and must obtain a business license that has to be renewed every single year. There is no limit to the number of short-term rentals a property owner can operate, and the current short-term rental licensings, they expire within a year. Those that are valid and are current within the city, current right now, will be grandfathered in and not subject to the new regulations. Some of the changes that will take into effect that are different, that are proposed for this amendment is they've basically added a definition for a short-term rental applicant, a short-term rental license. C definition has been added. Location restrictions have been added to this, where now for single family and duplexes, you cannot have another short-term rental license within 1,000 feet distance requirement. That's from property line to property line, closest property line to the closest nearest property line. They also created density restrictions for multifamily complexes, which states that there are no more than 10% of the units for any 10 or more units in a building. It's a grandfathering fee. Licensing fee also have changed to $250 per license. Again, as stated, a business license is required. Insurance is required for the short-term rental. And the residency requirements are licensees must reside in one of the 13 surrounding Metro Atlanta counties: Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Clayton, Gwinnett, Paulding, Henry, Cherokee, Douglas, Rockdale, Fayette County, Coweta County, and Forsyth County. Just to let you know, the timeline we're looking at is to possibly go to end of comment to go to zoning committee on March 24th, I believe that is, with a CDH hearing on March 25th and full council April 25th. One of the other aspects of the licenses is that now the violation period is 3 per every 5 years, as opposed to what was previously written in the license. And there's a penalty, as with all civil cases, which will be up to $1,000 per fine. That's it.
All right, thank you so much, Greg. So next up, I'm going to bring up David Zaparanik, the city arborist. Before David begins, I will tell you that his segment of the webinar is a little lengthier than the first two. The first two are a little more straightforward or digestible. The TPO items that we have on the MPU agendas are a little bit more involved. So David is going to take some time to go through those. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. I apologize. Please use the Q&A feature to record your questions. If we can answer them during the session, we'll go ahead and do that. Some of them may be answered audibly, particularly if multiple people are submitting the same question. We'll go ahead and answer that question live. The others will answer in the Q&A feature. All right, moving right along, David.
Good morning, everybody. This is David Zabranik, our Arboricultural Manager for the Office of Buildings. The tree protection ordinance number is 24-0-1691. Before I get into the proposed changes of the ordinance, just wanted to go over some, there's been a lot of studies about trees and the benefits of urban trees. And there are several of them. One of them is they reduce air pollution. The canopy of the city reduces the temperature in the city up to about 2 to 4 degrees. They can reduce the rate of cardiac disease and strokes. They protect biodiversity like migrating birds and pollinators. They reduce obesity levels by encouraging outdoor activities. They manage stormwater. They increase our property values, and they reduce stress. Sorry. So getting into a little bit about the tree protection ordinance, a little bit of history. The first tree protection ordinance was passed in 2001. And there have been a couple of attempts that have failed since then in 2014 and 2021. We need to update the tree protection ordinance because we've done some canopy studies and there's been a decline in the canopy by about 1.8% since we started canopy studies in 2008. And the City Council has passed a resolution in 2023 wanting to reach and maintain a canopy cover of 50%. And currently the average canopy coverage is 46.5%. What we have done in the past couple of years is we have been working on updating the tree protection ordinance, and we've done it in phases. In the first tree protection ordinance update, it was passed by council in December of 2022 after having several working group meetings in that year between April and August. And phase two, and during that time, we did pass several things, but there were some items that were a little bit more deeper dives into the ordinance, like recompense and metrics for saving trees. We did not get through those discussions in phase one, so we moved those to phase two. And in phase two, the working group meetings met from February through June in 2024. In the phase two working group meetings, we did hire a mediator, and his name was Michael Elliott, and he helped us put together the 24 members that represented 4 caucuses. And those groups were the development community, tree advocacy community, equity and affordable housing community, and city agencies and departments. And all in all, we had about 32 meetings over 5 months. From those phase two working group meetings, there were 5 recommendations that came out of it that Dr. Michael Elliott submitted in a final report. One of the recommendations is to establish distinct preservation and planting standards for single family subdivision greenfield developments while allowing for alternative performance standards. The second one was to increase recompense with reductions for on-site tree practices and high priority city goals to provide sufficient resources for a robust public forestry community or program. The third one was to establish standards for commercial, multifamily, and mixed-use developments. The fourth one was to establish a more robust public forestry program to support preservation, planting, and maintenance of the urban forest. And the fifth one was to improve administrative decision processes that are transparent and enforceable. The fourth and fifth one, you won't see specifically in the proposed ordinance, but they did help us guide us in writing the tree protection ordinance. So currently, one of the things that have changed is how we value trees. The current standard is basically all trees are treated the same, and they are required to be replaced inch for inch. In the proposed standard is to put trees into two categories and categorize them as either a priority tree or a non-priority tree. And priority trees are considered more environmentally valuable, and it's based on the species and the size. But they are still required, and priority trees are required to be replaced inch for inch. And they also have more standards for protections. Non-priority trees are still required to be protected and still require a permit, but they are only replaced half an inch for every inch removed. For example, if you have a 20-inch diameter priority tree, the replacement inches is equals to 20 inches. If you have a 16-inch non-priority tree, then you would only be required to replace 8 inches of new trees. Something else that has changed is the recompense. The recompense is what's required to be paid to remove healthy trees. And that payment is going into the Tree Trust Fund, which supports plantings, maintenance, and management of Atlanta's urban forest. The current calculation for tree recompense is $100 per tree plus $30 per inch, and that has remained the same since 2001. The proposed formula is a little simpler. It is just simply $260 per inch, but there are incentives for affordable housing and protection for protections for conservation areas, which can decrease the cost of the recompense. The recompense is proposed to be raised over a 4-year period, and that would start at the beginning of each year of 2026 and moving on up to 2029, where the $260 would become into effect. The changes to the single family standards is different from what's currently how trees are currently protected. Right now, trees in the setback are required to be saved, but in the proposed ordinance, trees are valued according to whether they're a priority tree or not, and tree density requirements are also changed, and there will be more trees required per lot in that, and the tree density will depend on the size of the lot. Currently, the diameter, the tree density requirement is based on how many inches of trees are required to be on the property. But again, in the new ordinance, it's going to change to how many, the quantity of trees that are required to be on the property. And when looking at creating a proposed plan for construction, there will be two options for protecting trees. The first option will be to preserve a certain percentage of existing priority trees that are on the site, and the percentage of priority trees that are required to be saved will depend on the lot size. If that preservation requirement cannot be met, then they will be required to use option 2, which is to restrict the limit of disturbance area, which is about equal to the zoning lot allowed coverage. The size, the limit of disturbance will also be based, the restriction for the size of the limit of disturbed area will be based on the size of the lot. Why are single family residential standards so important? In the canopy studies that we've done, it has been known that the percentage that 76% of the city's canopy is on single family lots, but they have the lowest development standard and they have the most predictable development parameters. And we've also noticed in the canopy coverage studies that we've done between 2008 and 2018 that we have seen the largest, that category of partial has the single largest category of canopy loss. So the table that's to the right is from one of the canopy studies. And what it's trying to show is, for example, if properties were developed to the maximum extent feasible according to the zoning lot coverage, then we would, if they were developed to 100% of the lot coverage, then we could potentially lose almost 15,000 acres of trees, and that would equal to about 37% decrease in the canopy coverage. So we really need to be protecting our trees. Moving on to single-family subdivisions, there are two options. Right now, the way that single-family subdivisions are created is they submit a LD permit, a land disturbance permit, and they are allowed to, under that permit, they put in the infrastructure that's required, like roads and underground utilities, and they use what's called infrastructure recompense, which is a cap on infrastructure installation. In option one, they would still use that option, or they would still submit a land disturbance permit, but they would have to replace and recompense all the trees that were cut during that stage of development. And when it gets to, and still in option one, when the individual lots, when permits are pulled for individual lots, then the single family preservation standards would be required to be met. In option two, they would be required to preserve about 50% of the property size in a conservation area, and those trees would be preserved in perpetuity, and they would count as replacement trees, and no additional preservation will be required during that construction phase, meaning once the individual permits for houses are built, they wouldn't be required to preserve any trees as long as they maintain that 50% conservation area. For changes to the commercial, mixed use, multifamily, and industrial development, the proposed standard is it's based on the intensity of the development. The planting standards are based on the intensity of the development to ensure adequate canopy on all sites. For example, the tree density requirement is 20 trees per acre, and that's separated, and we separate the developed portion of the site from the undeveloped portion of the site. In the developed portion of the site, we would subtract out things like the footprints of buildings, roads, permanent water bodies, things like that. And once all that is subtracted out from the developed portion of the site, then we would calculate how many trees are required to be planted from that, or we would get how many trees. Yeah, that's when we would get how many trees are required to be planted. Preserving priority trees. When we preserve priority trees growing on the site, they qualify for reducing the planting density standards. One exception to this standard are greenfields. When a greenfield is described as a parcel that is not developed and has full canopy coverage, and the property is 5 acres or more, and on these properties, they would be required to preserve 30% of the property in a protected preservation area. For public projects, there have been some accommodations for trees on public projects. Right now, the replacement rate is inch for inch. and it will remain the same. The difference is that as long as tree density is met on the property, then the developer can apply the recompense that would be required for offsite plantings to better tree planting and forest management. And better tree planting, an example of better tree planting is, let's say that they want to plant a tree in an urban area where there's already a sidewalk. Well, there's a lot of charges that come along with, or a lot of costs that come along with removing existing concrete. And we have planting standards that would require soil cells and a special soil media to be put in those planting areas. And so the cost for planting those trees or forest management, like removing invasive exotics, can be applied to the recompense that would be required for trees that are planted off-site. And for affordable housing, there's partial and full waivers of off-site replacement planting and recompense that are available to affordable housing developments that meet the required thresholds. There's 50% to 100% waivers depending on the percentage of units meeting the area media income requirements. And lastly, we currently do not have a registration program. So what we are proposing is to have professionals to register with the city, with the Arborist Division, for anybody who is applies to remove trees, so tree companies that remove trees, or anyone or any professional that submits site plans or information that are related to permits to the Arborist Division. They would be required to register with the program. The registration is free, but one of the reasons we want to do it is it makes those folks accountable to following the tree protection ordinance, and it allows us to better enforce the ordinance by suspending them if they have violations, like let's say the trees are cut down illegally, or there is a violation or of submitting applications or information that's related to a permitting. The first violation is just a warning, but if there are 2 violations or more, then they are suspended from the registry. And depending on how many violations there are, then there will be a difference in how long that suspension is active. So we have the legislative process here laid out for the TPO. The substitute, there was a legislation submitted back in December, and that was a shell paper, but we submitted a substitute with all the information in it on January 28th. We are going, as Leah had mentioned before, we are meeting or attending the NPU meetings February through March to answer questions about the TPO, as well as the companion administrative zoning variance, which I'll get into in a minute. The administrative variance will have to go to the zoning review board and then the zoning committee, and then there will be a CDHS committee meeting in March or April, and we are anticipating full council vote either in April or in May. So the administrative setback variance is 24-0-1. And the purpose of this setback variance,
the purpose of the setback variance is to reduce the setback administratively to save trees in their critical root zones. If an applicant seeks to, if an applicant finds that a tree is impacting the design of the setback of their building or their proposed construction of their single family home on their property, they can ask for an administrative variance up to half of the setback. For an example, if the setback is 15 feet, they can ask for an administrative setback up to 7.5. And that setback would only be granted administratively in consultation with the city arborist. If someone needs to add something for more than half of the setback, then they would have to go through the Board of Zoning Adjustment for that variance reduction. And this is to save priority trees here in the city of Atlanta and to maintain our tree canopy. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Greg and David and Kieta. Thank you all. So if you would like more information on any of these ordinances that we've discussed, please screenshot or jot down the information that you see on the screen now. We'll also drop that in the chat before this is over. But you can reach out if you have questions about the party house legislation. Please reach out to Director Holmes at kmholmes@atlantaga.gov or 404-615-6612. If you have questions about the short-term rental ordinance, please reach out to Director Gregory Pace at gpace@atlantaga.gov or 404-330-6147. Or if you have questions about the tree protection ordinance, please reach out to City Arborist David Zaparanik at dzaparanik@atlantaga.gov or 404-865-8489. And I believe we will now be taking questions. Yes, okay, great. So we're going to take some questions. And I think I have them up here. Yes, we do. All right, colleagues. So the first question that I have in front of me is regarding the party house. Why are the party house legislation, why are nonprofits exempt?
Party houses is to regulate those places that charge an entry fee to go to a party. Nonprofits generally usually do not charge a fee to attend an event. For example, I used to work for the Atlanta Bar Association, which is a nonprofit, and we used to host every spring a bench and bar. And there was no registration fee to enter, while there was a fee to come to the bench and bar, but it was to cover the food and the incidentals, the security, et cetera, associated with the nonprofit. It's associated with the event and not to benefit the nonprofit. A party house is to benefit the party provider. So the person who is throwing the party is charging a fee for you to enter their establishment.
Thank you so much, Director Holmes. Could the short-term rental legislation also consider requiring a public listing of all licenses granted? Director Pace?
Good morning again.
Turn your video off.
My apologies. Good morning again. The short-term rental licenses, it was not an added feature to list the licenses that are issued. However, through open records requests, you can find this information. We also, I believe, previously had where the owners would need to notify the neighbors that they were listing their licenses. At this present time, it's not needed simply because of the 1,000-foot distance requirement, which will space a lot of these short-term rentals apart.
Thank you, Director Pace. You mentioned a chart was added to the legislation to assist police. Can we see that chart?
Sure, the chart has been distributed to all the MPUs. It is inside of the fact sheet that was attached to the legislation. I'm sorry, do we have a copy of the chart, Leah, do you know, that we can show today?
I could pull it up.
Thank you.
It'll take a moment, but as I multitask here, but we could get it pulled up, sure. All right, I'll move on to the next question while staff pulls up that chart from the fact sheet, please. A 1,000-foot distance requirement Oh, that isn't a question. But thank you for the input. We'll be noting all the input as well, but right now I want to get through questions. I would like to understand the process for addressing problematic short-term rentals better. If there is not a police citation, but a complaint, how is that handled? Do violations include all city ordinances or just noise? If all three violations are at one weekend, is the license revoked? Will neighbors be engaged in appeals? Is the penalty for operating without a license $1,000 a day? So several questions there, but the gist of it is addressing problematic short-term rentals.
That's correct. So it starts as a complaint, and those complaints will be investigated. A lot of them are at night or on the weekends. Yes, a lot of them involve noise, partying, etc. So that is an enforceable offense by the police department. Anyone that has a short-term rental license, it will be investigated by APD, and they will receive a correction notice and a citation to court if it's not corrected. The cases are heard by the municipal court. So once the cases are adjudicated, if they have 3 violations that are adjudicated by the courts, then and only then can the license be revoked and not renewed for, I believe it's 1 year.
Thank you so much, Director Pace. Will there be any additional, will there be any additional zoning requirements in the proposal? Mr. Adan, if you don't mind clarifying which proposal this question is related to, and we'll come right back to that question. We'll circle back to it. Next question is, can you have a party house without a short-term rental license?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can have a party house without a short-term rental because they are not the same thing. They are 2 separate uses. A party house is defined as one thing and a short-term rental is defined as another. Party house is a large gathering for a fee to enter into the home, and it is regulated by the zoning ordinance. And short-term rental is a license that is regulated by the licensing of the city.
Thank you so much, Director Holmes. Mr. Adon wants to know, how does this play with ATL zoning 2.0? So Director Holmes, if you wouldn't mind talking maybe about how these ordinances interact with ATL zoning 2.0?
Party house is an existing regulation of the zoning ordinance, and it will roll over into ATL 2.0. The administrative variance was contemplated as a part of the idea labs and is now being added to the current zoning ordinance and also will roll over to ATL 2.0.
All right, thank you so much. So currently, and I believe this question might have been related to short-term rental, currently, can you confirm that a business is not needed at this time?
A business license, I believe, is what you're speaking of. A business license currently is not required for a short-term rental license. This ordinance requires a business license once it goes into effect, this amendment.
Awesome, thank you so much. Regarding the tree ordinance, are tree preservation requirements in stream buffers and floodplains being decreased? Protecting these areas is critical for Atlanta's resiliency.
So in the proposed ordinance, there are some allowances that the stream buffers and floodplains can be part of the conservation areas. I don't recall what the percentage is off the top of my head, but there will be some, but you won't be able to use all of the stream buffer and floodplain in instances of when developing these properties.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, a question about short-term rentals. Doesn't the rule that short-term rentals properties be located 1,000 feet apart disadvantage homeowners who would be prevented from having an Airbnb? I understand the idea of limiting short-term rentals in neighborhoods, but it doesn't seem acceptable to allow one neighbor to have an Airbnb and disallow another.
It's exactly as you stated. It is to limit the number of short-term rentals in a neighborhood, so as to not disrupt the fabric of a community of permanent homeowners. So that's the intent of the 1,000-foot distance requirement.
Thank you so much. There seems to be a general consensus by the MPU leadership that this feels a bit rushed. Can you expand on why this timeline seems so compressed? And I'll ask, no, this, I believe this is, I don't know which ordinance this is related to, but perhaps I'll ask the commissioner to speak to the process in general or the timeline in general.
Sure, yes. We have a lot of initiatives underway in the Department of City Planning. I'm sure you all know the Comprehensive Development Plan, Plan A, is going on right now. We're rewriting the zoning ordinance. We have been working on the short-term rentals ordinance since before I got here in 2022. And the tree ordinance, I think we've been trying to get it rewritten since what,
21 or 2014.
2014, and then, yeah, to 2021. Tree protection ordinance and short-term rentals came together at the same time. We didn't plan it that way, but that is the way that it worked out. The tree protection ordinance took a long time with the working group. We had so many knowledgeable people in the room working together with Dr. Michael Elliott to come up with recommendations from the working group. And we had a really good process and it came out great, but these happened at the same time. And we were a little concerned that it might feel overwhelming. And that's why we planned to have these webinars, and we will keep doing them until everybody's comfortable. We've got 2 planned. There could be 1 more. And we'll be out, me or my 2 deputy commissioners, Janity Sidabal or Janisa Elias, will be at all of the NPU meetings to answer questions and help y'all through it. I know that the TPO is a lot to read, but we're here to help and make this go as smoothly as it possibly can.
And if I may add to what Commissioner Prince said, the items that are required for a vote on your agenda are separated on the agendas, on the NPU agendas, from the ones that we invite review and comment on. And the commissioner and deputy commissioners, as Commissioner Prince pointed out, will attend every single MPU meeting, possibly twice if necessary, but they will attend every MPU meeting in February to answer questions about these items, even the ones that only invite a review and comment.
Yeah, I'm going to expand on that. And I just want to make sure that it's clear for everybody. Only changes to the zoning ordinance go to the NPUs. We are permitted to bring the fee increases to you. So when we had the change to the party house ordinance, and the change to the party house ordinance really was all about clarifying it because it was written in sort of a complicated way. And it was police were having to enforce it at night and it wasn't very clear. So we rewrote it and hoping to make that clearer. And the short-term rentals ordinance, which is a licensing ordinance, ordinarily would not go to NPUs at all. But we wanted y'all to have the context of what the change to the party house ordinance was all about. So we brought you the short-term rentals ordinance. Now the fee is changing on the short-term rentals ordinance from $150 per unit to $250, which is fair because the fees are supposed to cover the cost of staff time, and we sure have put a lot of time into this. With the administrative variance ordinance, the one that allows you to decrease the side yard setback in order to save trees, that is a change to the zoning ordinance. So that would come to the NPUs, but it really only makes sense in the context of the larger tree ordinance. So we brought you the tree protection ordinance, and the fees are changing there as well. The recompense is going up to market rate because if you're taking out a tree and the city has to plant it, the person removing the trees should pay the cost of planting the trees. At least I think so. So that's what we have proposed. We wanted you to see the bigger picture. And like I said, we will keep coming out to meetings and helping with this as long as we need to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Commissioner, and thank you for that question. All right, what are the incentives for affordable housing? I don't know if that,
I think that's me.
okay. We're going to assume that that question is for David.
Yeah, so as for affordable housing, there are several different requirements to meet the requirements, and they're broken up into rental units for sale and affordable single family homes. To get into the specifics, for a rental unit, there is a 50% waiver there's a 50% waiver if you have 80% AMI, as long as there are 15% but no less than one unit on the property, and there's for 60% AMI, you must have 10% but not less than one unit on the development. For 100% waiver, then you have to have 20% units at 50% AMI, or 40% of the units must be affordable at 60% AMI. And then for sale multifamily developments, there's 100% waiver where if you have 10% but not less than one unit at 80% AMI, and then you must have for 120% AMI, there must be well, actually, that number, what I'm looking at I think is incorrect. I'm not sure what the percentage number of units for at 120% AMI. But as far as affordable housing, single family homes, if the buyer is making 120% AMI or less, then there is a 100% recompense rebate for those affordable single family homes.
All right, thank you so much, David. The next question is also for David. What is the justification for using the tree trust fund for removal of trash, existing structures, and safety hazards? Purchasing property to permanently protect tree coverage is relevant, and the others don't support a healthy urban forest and should find another funding source.
So I think what is being asked is for property that is bought with the tree trust fund money. Sometimes there are structures on the property that need to be removed because in the ordinance it's required that the properties are made available to the public for passive use. And what has been originally, or what typically is done, is that trails are created on the property so that it is made for public use, and those items need to be removed so that nobody gets hurt. As far as finding another funding source, I don't really have a response for that. But if there's any recommendations, then we would be glad to take any comments about that.
Thank you. And to be clear, the purpose of this session and all of our NPU engagement and all of our engagement in general is to welcome your feedback. So the commissioner is in the background saying we welcome their feedback, and I want to amplify that. We welcome your feedback. That's why we're doing this, because we want feedback. I'm not reading, or I'm not intending to read the feedback aloud right now, because I want to make sure that we get everyone's questions answered. We only have about another hour. I do want to make sure we get the questions answered, but we do welcome the feedback, whether you send it to us via email to the appropriate folks that I put up on the screen a little bit ago, or you send it to us as part of your NPU's formal recommendation. We absolutely want that feedback. Thank you so much, Director Holmes, for pulling that up on the screen. Do you want to go back to Ms. Cornell's question? You're muted if you're speaking.
I'm sorry. I need to unmute myself. This is the fact sheet that was sent to all of the NPUs with the legislation for Z 2505. At the bottom of that legislation, you will see the chart, the revised zoning districts, zoning designations for party houses, where they are permitted and where they are prohibited. And this chart is what I meant when I said they were reorganized into a chart so they would be easily accessible and viewable to our police department when they are out on a call.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. And I think what we'll do is upload all of these fact sheets and all of the materials that are already attached to they're already linked to your NPU agenda. But just for ease of reference, we'll make sure that all of these fact sheets and all of the materials that will help you review these items, we'll make sure that all of that is uploaded to the website where the web page rather, where all of the planning initiatives information will be housed. All right, thank you so much, Director Holmes. The next question is, during our NPU meetings, what would we be actually voting on regarding the party houses and short-term rentals? Are we voting to approve or disapprove of the new ordinance that was outlined? Thank you, Mr. Carver. I love that question. Well, really just because I love the opportunity to talk about NPUs and the process. So you will be voting to make a recommendation. NPUs, for the record, do not approve or disapprove of ordinances, but you do make recommendations to the city council and to the mayor's office. So, or to the mayor's administration, I should say. In this case, you'll be voting specifically on the party house amendment to the zoning code ordinance or to the zoning code. And you'll be voting on the creation of an administrative variance for the tree protection ordinance. For short-term rentals, there is included in that ordinance, there is a fee change. So that will appear on your agenda as a matter for review and comment. The same goes for the tree protection ordinance recompense change. That will also appear on your agenda as a matter for review and comment because there is a recompense change. So clear answer is party houses and the creation of the administrative variance for the TPO will both appear on your agenda for a recommendation from your NPU. All right, the next question is, may the 50% subdivision conservation area be on a private lot or must it be a separate lot owned by an HOA?
Hi, this is David again. The 50% conservation area must be on the same property that's being developed, and no, it cannot be on a separate property that the HOA owns.
Thank you so much. How does this new TPO address that recently single-family housing hasn't been where the largest percentage of trees are coming down? The last numbers we have are from 2023, and they show that it is now commercial and multifamily where we are losing the most canopy.
The preservation standards on the incentives for the commercial properties, multifamily, industrial, and so forth. There are incentives for preserving 30% of the property. And for greenfield sites, they are preserving 50% of the property. So those are some of the ways that we've addressed preserving trees on commercial, multifamily, and industrial properties.
Thank you, David. Another one for you. It's also regarding the tree protection ordinance. Did the TPO task force support this version of the tree ordinance? I understood that members did not see the version introduced until it was publicly available. I also understand that they are lobbying for change. Transparency in terms of their support is really important to me. And if what I have been told is true, it is unfortunate that the stakeholders were not able to get to a point of consensus.
So we have been meeting with the stakeholders and working with them. And we are going to continue to work with them through this process. So they have, so we are being open to meetings on all sides of the caucuses that we have that were a part of the stakeholder meetings.
Thank you. And can you explain why actually, David, would you mind taking a minute to talk a little bit about the stakeholder group? Who was it made up of? Like what types of people were represented there? What kinds of conversations did y'all have? Because I understand it would be quite challenging to get everybody on the same page. And I think it's probably a good opportunity to talk a little bit about that, ever so briefly.
So Dr. Michael Elliott was the mediator for the Phase 2 project. And he helped us put together the 24 members that made up the stakeholder groups. And he organized the stakeholders into 4 caucuses, and that is the development community, the tree advocacy community, equity community, and affordable housing, as well as City of Atlanta departments. That's who made up the stakeholder groups.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, David. Can you explain why public landscaping projects are now exempt from the appeals process? Without appeals, there's no public oversight to make sure public landscaping permits follow the TPO.
I am not, maybe there's a misinterpretation of that, because I don't believe that the public landscaping projects are exempt from the appeals process. If you could maybe send me an email where you see that, because I don't believe that there is I believe that there is still an appeal process for that.
All right, thank you so much. Is the administrative variance only for high priority trees? Please define. I heard it was for any tree over 6 inches.
So the administrative variance for the companion ordinance related to the TPO, it is for high priority trees, and there are some high priority trees that are 6 inches in diameter, but it's not just the diameter, it's also the species. So there is a table that is in the ordinance that lists out which trees are priority and what diameter inch, and what trees are non-priority. So you would just go by that table that's been put in the tree ordinance.
Thank you so much. Also, regarding the administrative variances for trees, we've had trouble in NPUB, and I am concerned. Instead of an entire variance, could a variance averaging approach work? Okay, could a variance averaging approach work? This is done with stream buffers.
Maybe that's something that Kieta can answer.
Director Holmes, would you mind taking a stab at that question?
We've not ever established a variance average for any type of setback. It would certainly have to be something that we would have to speak with our law department about regarding an appeal that would average it, because what would the average be measured against, considering if there is no other variance on another lot in the same area. So that comment we would have to take and do further research on.
Thank you so much. Please clarify, can people throw a party without a fee at a short-term rental as under the ordinance, as long as a fee is not charged?
It kind of, I'm with you, Greg. It kind of seems like the question is asking us both to answer it. And so it sounds as like the question is laying the two on top of each other. So I'll just speak to the party house. If someone is operating a party house and they are also operating a short-term rental, there are two things that they are doing. So one, whomever investigates needs to understand whether or not a party house is permitted in that district. And then if it is permitted, is the person operating under a special administrative permit as required by the code? Greg?
Yes, and if it is a short-term rental and there that has it's a property that has a short-term rental license and they are throwing a party and it's declared as a party house at that time without a special administrative permit, it is a violation of the short-term rental license and therefore would be enforced accordingly.
Okay, thank you both so much. Next question. Does the short-term rental proposal distinguish between a person who just rents out a room in the house in which they live versus turning an entire unit into a short-term rental? It seems like they're very different things.
The short-term rental definition is any portion or the full property being rented for less than 30 days. So if the person is renting a room for less than 30 days, that room is considered a short-term rental property. If it's rented for more than 30 days, then a short-term rental license is not required. It's based on the definition of a short-term rental as opposed to the unit or a room being rented at the property.
Awesome, thank you so much. Does grandfathering apply to only current owners or to the property? For example, if we sell, would a future owner be unable to use our apartment as a short-term rental if our neighbor across the street has an active license?
So it's really for the property because the property owner can actually hire a short-term rental agent to operate their short-term rental license. However, if the property owner changes if the property owner sells the property, they can have that license transferred into their name. There is a process for that as well. They need to do that within a timely manner. I believe it's 30 days. And then that license will go under their name. It still has a 1-year renewal, so they must renew it within the year of the initial license issue.
If the short-term rental license is revoked, would their grandfather status be removed?
If it is revoked, that means the license is no longer valid and they would have to apply for a new license once the revocation period is over, and they would have to adhere to the current regulations. So in essence, to answer your question, no, they would, yes, they would be applicable to the new short-term rental license requirements, and the grandfathering would be null and void.
Thank you, Greg. Is a party house a location or an event? Is it not a business and therefore needing a license?
A party house is defined as a large gathering for a fee to enter. It is permitted in certain districts via a special administrative permit, and prohibited in other districts. And even when it is permitted via a special administrative permit, it cannot be within 150 feet of any type of residential zoning district. So it is a defined use, not an event. It's a defined use.
Okay, thank you very much. Regarding short-term rentals in multifamily buildings, does an applicant need to prove that short-term rental does not violate the building's declaration and covenants?
The City of Atlanta DCP does not engage in the covenants of the property if it's a multifamily unit. The multifamily building property manager, property owners, property management company must obtain a short-term rental license for the complex itself in order for anyone within the complex to apply for a short-term rental. So in essence, before the unit can get a short-term rental license, they must be ensured that the complex itself, property management company, has applied for a short-term rental license for that property.
All right, thank you so much, Greg. If someone has a short-term rental license, are they allowed to renew infinitely are they allowed to renew indefinitely, or will other properties within 1,000 feet be given a turn at the end of the year of the current license?
They're allowed to renew indefinitely. There is no, this is not a kind of a lottery type of thing. Once they meet all of the requirements, they have a year to renew that. Well, that next year they must renew that license. If they do not, then someone else can apply for a license.
Awesome. The next question is for David. What do you think are the most important, David or Commissioner Prince, what do you think are the most important 2 to 3 changes in the proposed TPO? What changes did we not get to yet that still need to be addressed?
So I think two of the most important changes was the recompense, because that has not been raised since 2001. And raising it allows the city to replace trees at the cost of for the city, at it costs the city to replace trees. Another one is the single family tree preservation metrics. Those are saving priority trees on the property. And we think that it's going to reduce the amount of trees being removed off of those properties. And as far as what did we not get to, we talked about so many things, I can't even think of anything that we didn't talk about. So I don't think that there's anything that we didn't get to.
All right, thank you so much, David. Okay, so the next question is a multiple part question. I'll go one at a time. Why is tree preservation policy being applied disproportionately to single family homes?
It's because we have, in the canopy studies that were done between 2008 2018, that is where we saw the single largest canopy loss. And that's why the single family tree preservation metrics have different metrics than the non-residential properties.
Thank you. And what steps are being taken to ensure that multifamily, commercial, and industrial developments contribute equally to tree preservation?
There are incentives and requirements for preserving trees on those properties. The conservation area where that area is preserved in perpetuity, that is an incentive to preserve trees on those properties, as well as preserving 30% of the and differently from that on greenfield properties, there is a 30% preservation requirement, and that will also contribute to the tree preservation on those properties.
Thank you, David. Who is measuring the financial impact of these regulations on single-family homeowners, particularly in historically underserved communities?
Well, we haven't really gotten into measuring the financial impact, so I don't really have an answer for that one.
Okay, thank you. Is there an effort to update the data and policies to reflect current urban growth, environmental justice, and equitable land use planning? I can read it again. Is there an effort to update the data and policies to reflect current urban growth, environmental justice, and equitable land use planning?
Okay, let's start with the documentation. So every 5 years, we measure our tree canopy. And in fact, in the tree protection ordinance, what we're doing is it says that we're going to measure the canopy every 5 years. It's something we do anyways, measure the tree canopy and see how we're doing on maintaining and growing the canopy. You know that our goal is a 50% canopy, and we're at 46% right now. And in fact, City of Charlotte is beating us. They're at 47%. So we got some work to do. But we do track the tree canopy and where we're losing it and where we're gaining it, because we know how important this is for the urban heat island effect and for air quality and for the health of our residents. So we are tracking that. As far as the data goes on the land use, we do have our GIS team tracking the changes over time, but I don't have any of them here to answer questions for you.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to ask again, or just remind everyone, if your question, if we have to get back to you or anything like that, please don't hesitate to send us an email or give us a call, and we'll try to get whatever information we're not able to give to you today. All right. Why are party houses or businesses allowed in residential areas? Aren't residential areas zoned strictly for residential and businesses zoned strictly for business?
As I review the list of where a special administrative permit allows a party house, while residential uses are allowed in many of these districts, RLC, C1, C2, all types of residential dwellings are allowed in the district, but the district itself is primarily a mixed district. So it is non-residential and residential, and it's not a primarily single family only district. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Director Holmes. All right, back to trees. Can you explain the tree preservation requirements for commercial properties? Does this include multifamily? David, maybe?
Sure. So the tree preservation requirements on commercial properties does include multifamily. There are no preservation requirements explicitly, and that is to provide flexibility in development in these areas to try to get density in those areas. What was the last part of that?
Oh. Okay, can you explain the tree preservation requirements for commercial properties? Does this include multifamily?
Yes, it does include multifamily.
Okay. Thank you. All right, short-term rentals. Why was the change made to allow owners to have multiple short-term rental licenses? The background on some of the changes and the reason they were made would be helpful for explaining to neighbors.
Part of the reason, there's a couple of reasons, but the main reasons, one, there are actually businesses, individuals that operate businesses as short-term rentals, and they have multiple. That was one of the things. Another was there was a case law in another state that that our legal advisors, our law department stated we needed to remove the limitation on the number of short-term rentals that a person could operate and own. So those were two of the major reasons for the change regarding why someone can own or operate multiple short-term rentals.
Thank you so much. Back to the tree ordinance. How do these changes affect a homeowner who's wishing to add on to their home or an outbuilding or pool where priority trees are in the targeted space?
So there is a process for that, and it gets a little bit detailed here, but if there's let's say that, I'm just going to give you an example to try to explain. Let's say that there's on the property, there's already an existing house, and of course there's house, driveway, sidewalk, so forth. What would happen is that you would have to calculate, and let's say that the property has 50% limited disturbed area. what you would do is that you would measure the square footage of the existing footprint of a house and driveway and sidewalk and any other structures that are impervious. And you would subtract that from the total square footage of what is allowed to be disturbed. And so, for instance, if you have 10,000 square foot property and 50% is allowed to be disturbed, and the current structures on it cover 4,000 square feet, then you would only be allowed to disturb 1,000 square feet on the property to put in the outbuilding or the pool or what have you. And the trees in that area would be allowed to be removed in that particular example.
Thank you, David. So while I have your attention, is there a list of priority trees available currently?
Yes, it is in the ordinance that was submitted on January 28th. It was included in that substitution.
Okay, is that in the recompense group of materials that they received? Do you know? No?
I don't know what was included.
No, the tree list was not included in the fact sheet.
Okay, can we have that so we can get it out? Is that something?
I can look for it. Yeah.
Okay,
Right
great.
now?
No. We'll just add it to the materials that they have. So we'll go ahead and add that to the materials that you already have. There is a list of priority trees. It is available. It is not included in the fact sheet, but we'll get it added. Thank you for that question. How can we comment on certain elements of the new short-term rental ordinance? And I will go ahead and answer that question. You can comment or oppose or support any elements of the short-term rental ordinance or any of these legislative items that we're discussing by participating in your neighborhood association and NPU meeting, where comments will be formally gathered from in addition to the commissioner and two deputy commissioners taking turns to attend every single NPU meeting. We'll also have the subject matter experts there at your NPU meetings, in addition to your planner, your NPU planner, and a member of the NPU resources and support team will all be there capturing all of the feedback that comes from your NPU. But in addition to that, you can always, if your input is different from the general opinion or sentiment of the NPU, for example, if your whole NPU is supportive and you're not, you can still be heard by submitting your own perspective via email or asking for your NPU to include your comments in their final recommendation that comes to the city. But either way, there are lots of options for your voice to be heard, and you can certainly send us an email, which I'll pull that back up on the screen before we end. I'll pull up everyone's email addresses so that we can make sure you're heard. All right. Thank you very much for that question. What is the rationale behind requiring both a business license and a short-term rental license for homeowners who live in their own property?
A short-term rental license is to regulate location, the use, and other requirements within the zoning ordinance. It is a business that is operated from someone's home. Similarly, a home occupation, and therefore a business license is required for that. And it's similar to running kind of a mini hotel. So with that stated, that is the reason for it. A short-term rental license, that license regulate where it can be, if it's allowed, distance requirements, all of those things that are covered under the zoning ordinance. And the business license is because it is a business within someone's home occupation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a very thoughtful question. And thank you, Greg, for the answer. The zoning administrative variance bypasses neighborhood input. Why is this change for setbacks being passed before the finalization of the TPO? What is the estimated number or percentage of trees that would be saved? Why is this variance needed, Director Holmes?
So I'll answer it in parts. Why is this change of setbacks being passed before the finalization of the TPO? So this legislation is a companion to the TPO, and they are traveling together through the legislative process. Is the way that our legislative process works is that these two pieces of legislation go to two separate committees of city council, amendment to the zoning code to the zoning committee, and then other administrative amendments through this Community Development and Human Services Committee. So they are not traveling separately; they are traveling together, and they'll be approved by the City Council, who is the legislative authority of the city. What's the estimated number of percentage of trees? I would have to defer that to David, but the understanding when the legislation was created was that 50% of a setback is generally enough area in order to save the tree and its critical root zone. And that's why the administrative variance is set at 50%. But I'll defer to David with regard to how much trees could be saved by this variance.
That's a really good question. We have not actually done a study on what the percentage of trees would be saved, so I don't have an answer for that.
All right, thank you both. Will there be any additional zoning requirements in the proposal regarding short-term rentals, such as inspections?
Currently, I can't say that there won't be any other requirements, but as it stands, if this amendment passes, it will be as you have as it is. There are no requirements for inspections at this time, but I can't foresee whether that will change or not in the future.
Thank you so much. I want to quickly just do a time check. We have about 26 questions remaining and about 35 minutes before noon. So I want to point out that if there are questions that we're not able to get to verbally or live, we will get answers to all of your questions. We'll capture those questions and get them answered. Those that have names attached to them, I'll put it that way. But we'll try to get through all of them. A comment from Amy Stout says, I guess I don't understand party houses at all. The overview says that Ordinance 19-0-1393 was created to combat the rise of incidents of party house incidents in which short-term rentals were utilized to host events. And now we're saying that a short-term rental is not required to have a party house. Seems like there are no rules on party houses except for the zoning category. Director Holmes.
In 2020, when party houses were at their highest, the country itself was in a pandemic, and there was an outgrowth of the gig economy. So there were violators that were hosting parties at their homes to generate income. In addition to that, there has also been, in the same gig economy, the desire to offer homes as a short-term rental location, right? And in addition to what could be effectively considered hotels. The city of Atlanta addressed both of those items. In 2020, the party house legislation was adopted, and shortly thereafter, the short-term license was also adopted. Party house is defined in the zoning ordinance as a use. Short-term rental is a license. If you're operating a party house as a use, you're regulated by the zoning ordinance. You're permitted to do that in certain zoning districts as long as you are not within a certain distance of a single family home. And in other places, you are prohibited from operating a party house. A short-term rental is a license in the city of Atlanta. Short-term rental is permitted only via the license is issued for a short-term rental. And then the changes that are before city council is to additionally add a business license for those operating short-term rentals. And I hope that answers the question, Leah.
Thank you so much, Director Holmes. I do see some comments that are not attached to questions. If time allows, I'll read those comments at the end, but I want to get through the questions first. I understand while these ordinances have been in the works for a long time, it does not seem to give enough time for the NPU to communicate these ordinances to our neighbors and their respective neighborhoods. Can the timeline be expanded? Commissioner Prince?
Okay. So the timeline that we have worked up is the timeline we thought that it would take to get this through. So we're gonna have to see how things, I feel like this is a non-answer, but we're gonna have to see how this goes and see how far we get on these, and when we can provide recommendations to the zoning review board and to city council. So I guess this is a developing situation, is the best thing I can say right now. I don't have an answer for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I would add to that the department, I recognize that the timeline is tight, no question about that. But I do want to add that the items on the agenda, only 2 of them require an actual recommendation from the NPU, and that's the party house ordinance or amendment rather, the party house amendment and the creation of the administrative variance. The creation of the administrative variance is on your agendas for 2 cycles. So you have the February and March cycles for the creation of the administrative variance. No, definitely not saying that that's plenty of time to get it done, but I am pointing out, because there was some confusion initially with the timeline, I am pointing out that the creation of the administrative variance will appear on your NPU agendas for 2 cycles, not 1, as the party house amendment will appear. Party house amendment is 1 cycle. The creation of the administrative variance is 2 cycles. All right. Oh, yes, ma'am.
There is one thing that's important to point out, though, is that the party house amendment is not really any change to the ordinance. It was just rewritten to be more clear. It says the exact same thing, just with different words, making it easier to enforce.
Agreed. Thank you so much. All right. Commissioner Prince noted that the administrative variance addresses side yard setbacks. Does it only address side yards, or does it also address front and rear setbacks?
It only addresses side yards.
Thank you so much. Are there exemptions for individual homeowners that want to use their homes for short-term rental when the other short-term rental near their home is owned by a corporation that have no stake in a neighborhood? Individuals may use short-term rentals for financial gain, but many may need to use for personal reasons, such as traveling, going out of state for healthcare, etc. So the question is, are there exemptions?
There are no exemptions for corporations versus an individual homeowner,
Okay,
fortunately.
thank you.
And I would piggyback on that's due to case law out of the circuit courts that says that we cannot base our decisions on the licenses based on where the person who owns it lives. So it doesn't give you any sort of preference if you live there.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you for that question. Okay, I'm not sure I understood the essence of the affordable housing incentive. Are you saying there is a waiver because of LMI housing? Is there a potential unintended consequence of having affordable housing with limited trees, which are typically communities who need it the most? Which one of you want to take that question?
Can you read it again?
Sure, happy to. The question is, are you saying that there's a waiver because of LMI housing? Is there a potential unintended consequence of having affordable housing with limited trees, which are typically communities, which are, sorry about that. Is there a potential unintended consequence of having affordable housing with limited trees, which are typically communities who need it most?
So the question, the first part of this I understand the essence of the affordable housing incentive. Are you saying there's a waiver because of, I think instead of LMI housing, I think what was intended was AMI housing. Are you saying there's a waiver because of the AMI housing? I'm not really sure I understand the question fully, but there are requirements to actually meet the waiver, to be able to obtain a waiver. And it depends on how many units are in the development, whether it's rental or for sale multifamily. I'm not sure if I'm really answering that question. I'm not really sure I understand it. But as far as not having trees on these affordable housing projects, there are going to be trees on the property because they are still going to be required to meet tree density requirements. And for commercial properties, it is 20 trees per acre, both on the developed portion of the property as well as the undeveloped. So there will be trees on the property.
I just want to give a shout out to our colleague, Assistant Director Carolina Rodriguez, who sent a note clarifying LMI is low to moderate income housing. I hadn't seen that acronym myself. So low to moderate income housing is LMI. Thank you so much, Carolina. And thank you, David, for answering that question. Given the age of many neighborhoods, how will the natural loss due to aging out of many of the trees, for example, DDH trees, be dealt with regarding coverage percentage? And I do know DDH as an acronym, but would you explain that for anybody here that does not know?
Yes, the DDH stands for dead, dying, or hazardous. And that is a standalone permitting process where trees are requested to be inspected because someone believes that the health of the tree is compromised. So there's an inspection request. The field arborist goes out to the property to inspect the tree and determine if it meets the requirements to be approved as dead, dying, and hazardous. As far as aging out, I don't know what the percentages of trees ages are. So I don't know how many trees are aging out at any particular time. So I'm not really sure how that's going to impact the canopy coverage.
All right, thank you so much. Kiara, I believe this question is for you. How would police, assuming this is related to the party house ordinance, how would police know how a property is zoned?
The zoning of a property is publicly available 24 hours a day via our GIS system. You can either use the planning viewer or any of the other apps on our GIS app to find the zoning of a property.
Thank you so much. Which items will be on the February agenda and which will be on the March agenda? So all of the items will be on all February agendas starting on Monday, this coming Monday, the 10th, I believe. And the tree protection ordinance item, the creation of the administrative variance and the recompense, those two items will appear on the March agendas as well. So everything will be in February's agendas starting Monday. And then those two tree protection ordinance related items will appear on the March agenda as well. For the short term, that is a question. I will come back to that if I have time at the end. Are companies, corporations, or LLCs allowed to apply for short-term rental licenses?
The answer is yes.
Awesome, thank you. Please explain a scenario in which an administrative variance to reduce a side yard setback would save a priority tree. Does an adjacent property owner get notice and have the ability to object before the variance is granted?
The setback is established on all properties to establish the buildable area. If there is if there is a tree in a setback that can be removed, or of the setback can be decreased up to 50% and save the tree, and the home can be redesigned, that project would be referred to our arborist division for consultation and clarification after the applicant submits the request to the Office of Zoning and Development for a variance, because this is the body, the Office of Zoning and Development reviews all variances. Once the arborist division reviews it and determines that the tree would be saved by the reduction in the setback up to 50%, then they would provide that opinion to whomever the assigned planner is, and then return it, and then the administrative setback variance would be approved. The adjacent property owner would not get the ability to respond or to comment, because it is an administrative review by the Office of Zoning and Development and the Office of Buildings Arborist Division.
Thank you so much, Director Holmes. Is there a map for short-term rental licensees? Is the distance of 1,000 feet linear or radial?
Currently, I'm not familiar. I'm not sure if we have a map for short-term rental licenses currently. Okay, I was just informed GIS does have a requirement, a map out there. As far as the distance is a circumference, it's a radius from property line to property line, from all sides of that property to the nearest closest property proposed short-term rental license.
Thank you. Is an SAP required for a party house?
Sure, it is. Yes, in the legislation that was submitted to all of the NPUs, in the second paragraph under item number 86, party houses are permitted in the following districts pursuant to the issuance of a special administrative permit or special use permit, and they are listed there in the table.
Thank you so much. Short-term rentals, what defines a bedroom for maximum capacity, Mr. Pace?
In the short-term rental legislation, in its amendment, there is a maximum of 2 persons per bedroom. That is the maximum for the bedroom. A bedroom itself is defined under the IRC, which is the International Residential Code, based on the means of egress and percentage of that means of egress for that property, for that structure.
So thank you. And also short-term rentals. No, keep the camera on.
I'm sorry. Hey, I'm here.
Was there an exploration to define and differentiate units that are considered a primary residence? For example, homeowners renting a room or renting once in a while versus rental homes that are focused on short-term rental. It's the short-term rentals that are ruining neighborhoods and profiting, while other primary residence homeowners are seeking to make additional income.
There's no distinction between the two, simply because renting the property is renting the property, whether that's a corporation or a primary owner. That primary owner may start with one and can grow into multiple, but nevertheless, the primary owner has the ability to rent their property. The short-term rental definition states that if it's less than 30 days, then it's a short-term rental. If they're renting it for more than 30 days, then it's someone renting their home with a lease and a tenant that's going to be there more long-term and be more of a part of the fabric of the community, as opposed to someone that's there just for a weekend or for a week.
Awesome, thank you. So another question about party homes. How will this be enforced? It seems that anyone can throw a party and say that they're doing it for donations. How do we enforce the party house ordinance?
Enforcement is done by the City of Atlanta Police Department. If they show up to a home where a party is active, then the police department would inquire as to whether or not a special administrative permit or an SUP has been issued. And should either of those items have been issued by the Office of Zoning and Development or by City Council, the person on site should be able to show them. With regard to how information is received in the office for the review of those items, all the requirements for a special use permit application are detailed on that application. And for a special administrative permit, all of the required documents are also listed there, and all those documents will be reviewed, and the application would be approved and at the review of those documents.
Awesome. Thank you. Does the 1,000-foot rule only apply to single family? Would the 1,000-foot rule be exempt in multifamily with multiple listings? And does the 1,000-foot rule apply to multifamily, Greg?
Yes, great question. The 1,000-foot rule only applies to single family and duplex families. Multifamily have an occupancy requirement where no more than 10% of the total units can be used as short-term rentals. That's up to that's 10 or more units. If there's a 3-unit, 4-unit, or 5-unit, up to 9 units, they can have a maximum of 1 unit as their short-term rental. Any 10 or more units can use their maximum is 10% of the total number of units in that building.
Thank you. Are there any tree presentation requirements, maybe preservation? Are there any tree preservation requirements on commercial developments that are adjacent to single family? Why don't we want minimum preservation for people in apartments and townhouses?
So in the tree protection ordinance, there aren't any tree preservation requirements that are specific to this particular scenario. But I know that in the zoning ordinance, and I don't know the zoning ordinance as well as Kieta Holmes does, and maybe she can speak to that, but I believe that there are buffer requirements between commercial developments and adjacent single-family homes. And as far as the second question, why don't we want minimum preservation for people in apartments and townhomes? We're wanting to be able to provide as much density on commercial and multifamily and industrial properties. But because we have but there will be trees on the property because there are tree density requirements. Again, it's 20 trees on the developed portion of the site as well as 20 trees on the undeveloped portion of the site. So there will be trees on properties that have apartments and townhouses.
Thank you so much. Yes, Kieta, would you mind speaking to the buffers?
Transitional yard requirements with a minimum of 20 feet is required between more intense uses, which would be multifamily or townhome type developments and single family developments.
Thank you so much. Why was there no exception for permanent residents to these requirements when they rent a room or unit in their residence? I totally understand why investors should be impacted, but why no exception for permanent residents? Commissioner Prince?
The courts say we cannot discriminate based on where the license holder lives. So that means it doesn't matter whether it's a permanent resident or a corporate ownership. We can't make any distinction between the two. We don't like it either.
Thank you so much. Do we need a business license for long-term rental?
Not to my knowledge, no. Long-term rentals are not required to, I'm not certain of that. I know that this ordinance requires a business license for short-term rentals.
Thank you. Will the database of short-term rentals be available for public view?
I believe it will. Yes, it will. It will. Once the amendment this passes, there will be a database and a area on the website to be able to access and see where majority of what all of the licenses are issued. Short-term rental licenses are issued.
When you say X number of trees per acre, what is a tree? 2.5 inches or what?
That's a good question. The quantity of trees that's required includes both existing trees and trees that are required to be planted. So if it's a newly planted tree, then it's 2.5 inches in caliper. And existing trees, could be any diameter inch. So it's both existing and newly planted trees that are included in that.
Is there an appeal process for an administrative variance?
An appeal for a decision made by any administrative official of the Department of City Planning is appealed to the Board of Zoning Adjustment, and that appeal must be submitted within 30 days of that decision.
Thank you, Kieta. Will the multifamily short-term rental standards affect apartment buildings that are specifically built for exclusive short-term rental use? This is happening at the Grant Building in downtown, and I think Ponce City has one also.
Currently, I do not believe so. Based on the zoning, this is something that we're seeking advisement from the law department. It's still kind of a situation we're trying to clarify, but most of those that were permitted under a hotel use, which would have been allowed in those zoning districts, which would allow for basically a full, it's really acting as a hotel as opposed to a short-term rental, which is what a hotel is. So I don't believe that it will, but we're getting further clarity on that from our law department.
All right, thank you very much. So it looks like the questions related to these 4 items have been answered. There are a few questions about engagement or how we receive your input, and then some questions about the recording. So let me just answer that for everyone. We are hosting another session, the same as this. So if you attended this one, you won't need to attend the second one because it'll be the exact same presentation. But you're welcome to if you want to. So we'll have this same session on Thursday, February 13th at 6:00 p.m. until 8:00 p.m. for those that were not able to make this session today. The session is also streaming live right now as we speak on YouTube, where it will remain. So if you want to review the webinar later, or if you want to send it to your neighbors, you can certainly do that as well via the link that staff has now put in the chat. You can watch it on YouTube. It will remain there forever. So you can watch it, at your leisure whenever you'd like, or you can share it with your neighbors as well as you like. I've seen and answered a couple of questions regarding the engagement process, and I want to reiterate and then add a little bit. For those, and then I think time will allow for me to read the remaining comments that weren't exactly questions, but were still input that I want to make sure that we all receive. So these items, as I mentioned, will appear on your February and in some cases March agendas. There was one question about the meetings that occurred before Monday. Those will appear in the first week of April agendas for the MPUs that met last week. It will appear, and those are, to be specific, A, B, C, E, and R. So these items will, specifically the tree protection ordinance items will appear on A, B, C, E, and R's agendas in April because those MPUs meet before the April cutoff where the items go to the zoning review board. So the zoning review board hearing is that first Thursday in April. I believe that's April 3rd. And these MPUs meet before that zoning review board meets. The party house and short-term rental ordinances will appear on your February agendas for A, B, C, E, and R. They will appear on your March agendas. And then the TPO ordinances will appear on your February and March agendas. And again, A, B, C, E, and R will also appear in April. So everyone has 2 cycles for the tree protection ordinance related items, and everyone has 1 cycle for the short-term rental ordinance and the party house ordinance. Keep in mind, the short-term rental ordinance is a matter for review and comment. It will appear under matters for review and comment on your agenda, not under matters for voting. It will appear under matters for review and comment. In addition to those avenues to give input, and I've also shared that you can send us your feedback directly to the email addresses that we shared, and I'll share those again. I'll leave them up on the screen as we exit the webinar. But in addition to those items, those avenues rather, you can also engage at these public hearings. So at the zoning review board hearing, there is a structured means of making comment on items. You can also engage, I think 2 of these items are at CDHS, right? At least 1 I know is that will be heard at CDHS. That also has a public comment. If somebody could refresh my memory on which one, that would be helpful. So we can get that out. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
So remember that the ones that are amendments to the zoning ordinance, that is party house and administrative variance, those go to the zoning committee. The short-term rentals ordinance and the tree protection ordinance go to CDHS. And they are just 1 day apart. But because of the ordinances that they amend, they go to those committees.
Thank you so much for jogging my memory. So the short-term rental and TPO will go to CDHS, that's the Community Development Human Resources Committee. And that particular committee does allow for public comment. So if you want to be heard on these items, you can attend the CDHS meeting and make comment on those 2 items. For the zoning related items, you could not make public comment on the zoning related items, but you can make public comment at the zoning review board hearing and at the full council meeting as well. And of course, they're just multiple.
You cannot make comment on a zoning paper at at full council. All comment is at the zoning review board.
Yes, zoning review board. Thank you, Director Holmes. I forgot about that. For full council, only for the CDHS item. So let me just, to avoid confusion, let me restate that. The TPO items and the short-term rental items, you can make public comment at CDHS and at the full council meeting of the Atlanta City Council. For the party house item and the TPO administrative variance, your comment is only made at the zoning review board hearing. Okay. In writing, you can submit your comments to the Department of City Planning staff, to myself, to your planner, to Greg Pace, Director Pace, to Director Holmes, to the city arborist, to the commissioner, to any of the deputy commissioners. You can also send your feedback to the council members, your council members. You can send in your feedback through multiple avenues, and we welcome your feedback. Specifically, as it relates to your suggestions on strengthening these ordinances or any other feedback that you have. We welcome that feedback and we want to hear it. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now so I can read the last few comments that remain here. We see where lots are developed. We see where lots that are being developed in the city of Atlanta have a vast majority of the trees removed and a new structure built back and no new trees planted in place. We appreciate all that you do to preserve the canopy. Thank you so much for that comment. Short-term rental 1,000 foot limitation and requirement for business licenses should not apply to homeowners who permanently reside in their homes, including those who have ADUs on their property. Thank you for that comment. And I'll point out, colleagues, if you want to jump in and respond to anything, feel free. Otherwise, I'm just going to read through them. as quickly as I can to try to cover them all. Income from short-term rentals in ADUs, and ADUs are accessory dwelling units, help us afford to live in the city of Atlanta, given the high rate of city and county property taxes. Thank you very much for that comment. It seems like there should be a different short-term rental permitting process for owner-occupied homes versus others. Thank you for that comment. For the short-term rental ordinance, please consider waiving the 1,000-foot distance requirement for duplex properties. Considering it is a single structure, it would make sense to allow both sides to be a short-term rental. Also, please consider some type of waiver process for the 1,000-foot requirement. I think it's important to make sure homeowners have some path to fairness and capitalism. Perhaps for owners who don't have a pre-existing short-term rental, or perhaps for owners who live in their home more than 50% of the year, they could do short-term rentals when traveling or something. I think the rules should target large short-term rental companies and corporations and not single homeowners who are looking for ways to monetize their investment, which they should be entitled to. Thank you for that comment. MPUE respectfully requests that we please expand the timeline. Thank you, MPUE. Consider this: if you apply for a short-term rental on your street and there is another short-term rental within 1,000 feet, but it is owned by a large entity owning many Airbnbs, and you are just a homeowner wanting to monetize your home for extra income, your short-term rental should take priority over a large corporate entity. People without any short-term rental properties should be priority over those with multiple to create some fairness in the ecosystem of short-term rentals. Thank you so much for that comment. The 1,000-foot requirement seems arbitrary and limited, so many homeowners that may be renting a room or occasionally renting while traveling. Was any thought given to this? Oh, I'm sorry, this is an actual question, I apologize. Was any thought given to this? And also, why wasn't there simply a total cap of units allowed to have licenses citywide proportional to residences in the city?
There was a consideration to do a total cap, but doing that would kind of I think it may space out or eliminate a lot of potentially having more individuals to be able to utilize that. It also would cause a kind of a mad rush to get licenses, and similarly doing somewhat of a lottery or opening the floodgates to try to obtain a license. So that was one of the considerations. I can't remember the other question regarding distance. The distance formula was taken into account similarly to some of we already have in place distance formulas for distance requirements for other uses, such as personal care homes and things of that like. So we piggybacked off of that to continue on that and continue in that context. The other thing I do want to explain is that there is an effective date. Once this is passed by the mayor, the enforcement will not go into effect until 15 days after his signature. Therefore, giving those that do not have a license currently to obtain a license under the previous ordinance and being somewhat grandfathered in.
Thank you so much. I definitely support the previous request for extending these deadlines for further engagement and understanding. We need to distinguish between renting the entire unit and renting just one room in the unit. This would be legal under the Fifth Circuit ruling. And last but not least, and this is a question for short-term rental, as written, the ordinance supports companies and does not protect neighborhoods. The law court case referenced, it would be great if you could please provide this information so neighbors may review it. How is it different from homestead tax exemptions? To the response provided saying that renting is the same regardless of ownership, Renting a property by an absent owner is not the same as being a primary resident. Respectfully, the lived experience is different. And the 1,000 foot distance requirement is moot as if licenses are grandfathered and there is not a list of licenses granted. So to all of you that have joined, you have submitted 99 questions or comments. We have heard every single one of them. We have responded to every single one of them. I thank you so much for taking your time out of your Saturday morning to join us and discuss these 4 items and to get answers to your questions. We are absolutely open for further and additional conversation. As mentioned, and I'm going to share my screen just one more time to get my colleagues' contact information up on the screen. But as mentioned, the commissioner and our 2 deputy commissioners will alternate appearances at your NPU meetings in February and March. And your NPU planner will be present at your meeting. A member of our NPU team's resources and support group will also be present at your meetings, and our subject matter experts will be present at your meetings. So there will be plenty of engagement, and we're here and available to answer questions via email, to respond to feedback that you send us, etc. Commissioner Prince, Director Pace, Director Holmes, or City Arborist David Sabranik, any other comments that you all have or would like to make?
I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I hope we have answered your questions. If you have more, please go ahead and ask. And if you have input for us, that's helpful too, because we need to hear from you on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else? Anything else? Okay, I don't see any. I am not that great at multitasking, so I am trying to moderate this conversation and pull up my slide that has the contact information on it. And for some reason, I think this is it. Boy, I had a hard time with that. I think I found it. And I'm going to go back one slide. My apologies, and I appreciate your patience. Here we go. Whew. All right, so hopefully you'll be able to see this on the screen. I'm just going to leave it up for the next minute or two. Feel free to screenshot that information. This presentation and all of the other info that we committed to will be uploaded to our website, where you'll be able to find this info and all the other fact sheets and contact information as well. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. If you don't have their contact info handy, I think most, if not all of you, have mine probably committed to speed dial. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm not the subject matter expert for these ordinances, but I will definitely connect you quickly or get answers to your questions. So feel free to reach out to me if you don't have anyone else's contact information handy. Last call for comments from colleagues. No, is that it? All right, we thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your commitment to your community. Thank you for all that you do to help us grow your community responsibly and with meaningful engagement. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We will see you on next month at your NPU meetings, and those that are joining us again on Thursday